everyone, and welcome to episode 29 of What to Think, the technology news podcast from VentureBeat.com. I'm Jordan Ovett.
And I'm Kia Kokolacheva. So today we're going to be talking to Michael Beach, a co-founder of Targeted Victory. The company provides programmatic advertising across all screens, a mobile-friendly donation service, and other services for political campaigns. And we're talking to him because we want to know how the Republicans managed to win so many elections last week.
But first, some technology news highlights from VentureBeat.com. Here are 1, 2, 3 of our most interesting stories from the past week.
Thanks, Jordan. So first up, Google, Spotify, and Pandora are apparently doing some deep learning magic deep in their musical offices. And they really just want to create better playlists for you. So Google, Pandora, and Spotify haven't exactly advertised it, but they're all working on using a type of artificial intelligence called deep learning to make a better music playlist for you. All three have recently hired deep learning experts. This branch of artificial intelligence involves training systems called artificial neural networks with terabytes of information derived from images, text, and other inputs, and then presents the systems with new information and receives inferences about it in response. Companies including Google, Baidu, and others have put deep learning to work for all sorts of purposes: advertising, speech recognition, image recognition, even data center optimization. Super nerdy. A startup even intends to use deep learning to recognize patterns in medical imaging. And since Jordan here wrote about this week, he's going to tell us exactly what's going on and exactly how we should feel about it.
That's right, I am, as I do as many weeks as I can here on the What to Think podcast. So in music, in streaming, the thing that happens, that is starting to happen, is researchers are setting up artificial neural networks to recognize patterns like chord progressions in music or different keys and other characteristics without needing music experts to tell the machines that that's what they need to look for. Basically, what this means is over time, a listener might go to Spotify or Pandora or Google Play or some other music service and be introduced to new music way freaking faster than if there was a human being directing certain algorithms to look for traits like volume within music automatically in machine listening. Or in the case of Pandora, if there are musicologists who are sitting there for 15 minutes per song and jotting down certain musical things that they hear in each song, which takes maybe way too much time, basically. And that means you might not get introduced to a new song for a year. Who knows? I don't know how long it'll take. But basically, what I'm thinking is that as you start to put these systems into production, which might not happen overnight, by the way, it might take a number of years, look the freak out, because over time, this is going to be something that's going to make everyone into a music snob. You're going to be exposed to not only the new music, but also the music where there's no previous data. It's called cold start, when there's not a lot of information out there on the internet to give people an idea about what one artist is associated with. So if you like Feist, you might like Cat Power because there are blog posts that talk about both of those artists together. But if there's no data for some artist, then maybe a machine can listen to a song and make a connection to this other song based on similarity and predict that a person who likes song A will like song B, and we're all going to become music snobs, and that's the end of the story.
So what you're saying is that this is all coming from the music itself. It has no outside input, as you mentioned, like blog posts and tons of history on the internet about these songs. There's no one sitting there telling it what to think, basically. But tell me exactly how that's happening without any human input, because normally algorithms, someone has to sit there and kind of write them. So tell me how this is happening without a human sitting there and telling it what to think.
That is a really good question. The answer will require about a half hour of explanation. So I am just going to tell you that it involves many layers of pulling out certain bits from a song and then translating those bits into what they call features of a song. And basically, as you extract those features in many samples of songs, you can then, when you hear a new song, start to recognize that and make an inference. And that has happened across different types of industries like pictures, and language as well. And now it is coming to music.
So they're training these algorithms, if you will, to become basically autonomous?
Yes, they are autonomous.
Wow, that's very magical.
It's like the Google driverless car, but for streaming music services.
You heard it first here, everybody. All right. Well, thank you.
So, yeah, let me tell you about something completely different. President Obama, he actually came out this week and endorsed net neutrality, and he demanded that the FCC turn the internet into a public utility. He actually issued a press statement where he said that net neutrality is common sense. And he said the US can't allow ISPs to restrict the best access or to pick winners and losers in the online marketplace for services and ideas. And a couple of things that he called out in specific was you can't do blocking. And that is if a consumer requests access to a website or a service and the content's legal, your ISP shouldn't be allowed to block it. That way, every player, not just those commercially affiliated with an ISP, gets a fair shot at your business. And then the other part of it is there's no throttling involved as well. And that means you can't have ISPs intentionally slowing down some content or speeding up others through a process often called throttling based on the type of service or your ISP's preferences. And so, Kia, I'm going to hereby tell you what to think about this.
Go for it.
Okay. This is a big endorsement for a concept that internet advocates have long talked about, which is that everyone should have a fair shot. And to come out and say that for Obama, it's actually a thing that gets a lot of people out here in the Bay Area pretty psyched because it kind of comes up in line with the hacker spirit, the build some stuff in your garage spirit that is the heritage of Silicon Valley. Like HP started that way, and
the whole idea that the next world-changing idea might come from two dudes in a garage.
Exactly. And the thing is, this lets fairness come into play. So if you don't have a lot of money to pay your ISP, then you are okay. You're not going to have your service slow down because some competitor down the block has crap loads more money. And this is basically something that he calls common sense. And that is something very democratic in the spirit of American history to call it common sense. It is it is hearkening back to the spirit that people should be allowed to do what they want. And for him to use that rhetoric is pretty interesting. It's a great idea. And I might be wrong on that. I'm sure there are people who are coming out of the woodwork to complain about my position here. But I'm saying that this is pretty supportive of the democratic do your own thing idea that everyone is involved, not just the big players.
I think it really comes down to how you think of the internet. Mm-hmm. Is the internet this public service, this public utility like roads and highways? Mm-hmm. Is this thing that everyone should be able to use and kind of build whatever on top of or from and benefit? Or is it a private thing? Is it like your driveway in your house that you bought and not anyone can step on it the way that they can step on the street on which you live? I think it kind of comes down to how you think about it. And it's pretty clear that Obama looks at it as this public good, this public, it's like the freeways and the highways. But I can see a lot of people around this country that could argue that no, it's not a public utility just yet. There's ISPs, there's all sorts of people and private parties that are owning it and providing it. And they should be able to have whatever business model they want if they're providing it. And that's the other side of this.
Well, we see that Obama, being the politician, is choosing a side, and this will be debated hotly. And we are looking forward to it. And there's one more story. So, Kia, what is it? I heard it's about .NET.
Apparently, Microsoft is open sourcing .NET.
What? What else are they doing?
Well, I think you should tell me what else they're doing because you are the resident expert on this.
Okay, so today, this is hot off VentureBeat. They announced plans to open source .NET and put that thing on GitHub. .NET is the programming language that Microsoft has endorsed for a very long time. It is their world that primarily runs on Windows. And not only did they do that, they also said that they're going to take .NET on Mac OS and Linux. It's totally crazy. And it reflects that Microsoft is doing totally crazy things. And by that, I mean they have started supporting more Linux on their cloud in Azure. And they've also, even as a supplier of virtualization software, come out in support of Docker and said that they are going to help people run Docker on servers running Windows in companies' data centers. It's totally going against what you would think they would do. And basically, they're trying to get more developers onto .NET and let existing .NET developers target more users. This is Satya Nadella's Microsoft. This is kind of crazy. This is why Microsoft has kind of gotten a whole new groove. And what I'm telling you what to think here is watch what Microsoft does next, especially with open source.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Satya, when he came on, he knew that things had to change. Mm-hmm. And this is just one more step in that.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to live in their bubble anymore. They want to interoperate, and they want to also embrace open source. And that is pretty surprising.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think lots of great things could come out of it. So we're going to stay tuned on that.
Yeah, and you can read more tech news, including news about Microsoft, you know where, on VentureBeat.com. And now, a quick thanks to our host and sponsor, software analytics company, New Relic. New Relic makes sense of billions of metrics across millions of web and mobile apps to help the people who build modern software understand the stories their data is trying to tell them. New Relic products, which support PHP, Python, Ruby, Java, .NET, Node, iOS, and Android apps, help improve software performance and reliability to provide a better experience for users and more success for your business. And now we have on the line Michael Beach, a co-founder of Targeted Victory. Targeted Victory provides programmatic advertising across all screens and a mobile-friendly donation service and other services for political campaigns. Before he was at Targeted Victory, Michael was National Victory Director for the Republican National Committee. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us and talking to us about what exactly happened last week, among other things. But before we get into the actual midterm elections, I want to see if you can kind of give us a nice overview of how technology has changed in the races over the years, so we can have kind of a context for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so over the last 8 to 10 years, I think you've really seen a rise in data-driven advertising in politics. It's probably been reflective of what's going on in kind of more of the general society, and especially brand marketing. One thing about politics is that you have these finite end dates with campaigns and election days where you really are able to try a lot of new things first there that you may see in the general market, a couple months later, and people aren't really afraid to experiment.
In terms of what technologies people used back in the day, so to speak, and in the past decades, what was common in terms of, for example, advertising, and what's increasingly common now?
To take an older model first, television in the past broadcast has been the dominant area in campaigns. And so even this year, probably 80% of all dollars spent on television were spent on broadcast. And through doing audience-based advertising, you've been able to see that specific shows. So really go to the long tail of content and identify, what audiences are watching which shows, so that you don't really held hostage by buying the show with the most audience, hoping to reach some of the people you want to talk to. You can actually buy the programming and really optimize your media plan. And obviously, with addressability being the next step in television, which will make television match up more closely with what we're doing online. Mm-hmm. And the way that we look at it is, we're really screen agnostic. And so we try to offer our platform. You can buy desktop, you can buy mobile, and you can buy local television.
I think one thing that was really interesting to me that I was reading about on the Targeted Victory website was that it's apparently pretty hard to spend money on advertising in a kind of correct, efficient way. So there's this whole thing about districts. It's way more complex, especially for congressional races rather than Senate. So what the heck is so hard about doing it right in congressional districts? And is that more about redistricting, or is it more about what technology you're using and maybe what device you're using?
There are 435 House districts across the country to use the United States Congress as an example, and they don't match up neatly with media markets. And you have some media markets that contain several congressional districts because they're split up according to population. And so like a market like New York will have over 20 congressional districts. in the DMA.
And DMA being what?
Defined marketing area.
Okay,
so
right.
in your broadcast market, your ad would run equally in all of those districts. And so when we looked at the most targeted congressional races in the country, the 100 that spent the most on television, over 70 cents on every dollar went into the wrong district before you even got into it. We're talking to the right audience. So in this case, Republicans versus Democrats versus swing voters. And that's a big issue, but that's really an issue that all local advertisers face because, all car dealerships don't make up their entire media market. All, local businesses are kind of fall into the same area. And that's where, really matching up those districts or business boundaries with media markets or, the ability to target on desktop and mobile, can provide a lot of efficiency.
So I guess my question would be like, how do you target politically? Because I'm assuming that if you're like a shoe brand and you want to reach people, you're looking at different things than if you're targeting a political campaign. Because obviously you've been talking about how media markets and political markets or districts aren't lining up. So what is it that you're really looking for and that isn't matching up with these traditional media markets?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So you really have two primary objectives when you're a campaign. So you want to really mobilize your activists or volunteers. So that could be raising money, that could be getting people to volunteer, or getting people that already support you to turn out at a higher number. Mm-hmm. And then you've got persuading, kind of softer support and persuadable voters, which is where the majority of the money goes.
Okay.
The first area, getting fundraising and getting volunteers, they don't have to necessarily live in your district to volunteer for your campaign or to donate money to your campaign. And so you can be, really knowing what your existing customer base is and modeling off of that is probably, your first step. But in the case of persuading voters, they have to legally be able to vote in your race. And so if you look at one of the most widely targeted races in the country in Kentucky, the Cincinnati media market, 82 cents on every dollar went into Ohio.
Wow.
And unless you go and buy a house with, 30 days before the election and move your family into Kentucky, you can't vote in that election.
Am I crazy to think that somehow there's a potential advantage in having an ad campaign target people out of state? I'm thinking of Missouri and Kansas. So if you're a voter in Kansas City metro area, is there some benefit of having the Missouri voter hear about some candidate who's running for a Kansas gig in the House of Representatives where they could start talking to the people in their offices or anything like that? Is there any uptick?
There's probably some type of long tail benefit, but I think it's outweighed by the fact that those impressions could have gone to the right person. And the way it's always been looked at is that when broadcast was such a dominant form of communication for everybody, when the majority of people got their video content from broadcast television, it was acceptable waste. That was just the waste was the cost of doing business. But now with fragmentation, that argument doesn't really hold. The fact that we argue that you should spend your first dollar in the most efficient way possible and not fund 1,000 points of broadcast television and then fund everything else with what's left over. And that's how the model in politics currently is. And when we look at it, there were campaigns that were paying $1,200 a CPM to talk to the targeted universe on television, and they could have bought digital video advertising for $24 a CPM.
Okay.
And so is a television ad on a 60-inch screen more effective than an ad on a 15-inch MacBook or on a phone? Sure. But is it that ratio? Is it $1,200 versus $24? And that's the trade-off that we're trying to get campaigns to change. And then really in the middle is cable television. Cable television is still underused in politics because it's really hard to identify your programming because people rely on Nielsen ratings for who to target with politics. And you've got these thousands of channels with really niche programming. And what we've done is partner with companies like RentTrack to actually create a rating system for every show on every channel, in every market all the time to say, I don't care how Nielsen 35 plus this program is. I care about how Republican, Democrat, or swing voter this program is.
Got it.
And taking 25 million televisions as opposed to, a sample of 28,000 households nationwide.
Switching away from a cable box to a smartphone, I know that there's certainly demographics where smartphones are more popular. And I just wonder for a younger generation, when people are constantly using their phones, even when they shouldn't even legally be, sometimes I might go across a state line. And I'm wondering how things have changed in terms of targeting ads correctly on a mobile phone you guys have managed to achieve that maybe wasn't possible 5 years ago. You talk about multi-screen. I feel like mobile is the important node there.
Yeah, mobile's huge. I mean, in 2012, if you look at audience base, so us buying a specific audience, mobile only accounted for less than 5% of our buy. This past election, it was 40%.
Okay.
So a huge shift in 2 years made possible by the fact that really the quality of audience data on mobile has completely changed. And there's probably two good examples. I would say that, Facebook by, being able to target people that are logged in, has been a really big difference.
What about Google? Is there any room for buying political ads through that ad network? I know it's such a massive market ahead of Facebook, and I just don't know if that shows up at all.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, search marketing is still a huge area on campaigns. For persuasion, YouTube is a very popular channel. I think that the ability to bring audience third-party data into Google's platforms will really change. Probably the weight, but that's the one limiting factor now.
When you talk about third-party data, I get really excited because I actually am the data reporter at VentureBeat, and I'm the nerdy one who thinks about the effects of implementing new kinds of data. What third-party data are you referring to? What type of stuff?
So in our case, it would be, we use load-and-use crowd controls, our DMP.
The what? I don't know what that is. Give me a sense of what that is.
So basically, a data management platform is a centralized hub of all of your online data, and then you basically connect that to various media exchanges and media partners. So in our case, it's connected to big demand-side platforms like AppNexus and DoubleClick Bid Manager and Facebook and different places to where we can now buy advertising based on our audience. So we focus on building a data set of, in our case, political data. So, how Republican you are, how Democrat you are, how swing voter you are likely to donate, are you likely to volunteer, how do you feel about different issues? And it allows us to put it into one central hub and then basically push that out to all these different media partners so that we can do programmatic media buying. We were a very early adopter of a data management platform all the way back to 2011, and that's really been a game changer for us.
Okay. Moving on to other technology, I noticed you guys advertise data science and data analytics as places you guys can help out. What exactly are you doing? And do you have a data science team like some of these startups and public tech companies? And I'm just wondering what they're actually doing.
Yes, that's been a huge area of growth. We actually recruited our head of data science away from Marriott Hotels last year.
Really? They have data scientists?
They do. I mean, and actually a lot of the same challenges. They're trying to really gamify their customer experience, get people to use Marriott more often, get existing Marriott customers to upgrade to better rooms, and really just kind of expand their experience. And they have much like politics, they have a perishable good in the case of a hotel room at night. And so, listening to their use cases is, that industry is very interesting.
So what exactly is data science helping you do? I mean, you mentioned upgrading hotel rooms. Are you upgrading people's voting behaviors? What are you doing with all that data science sorcery over there?
One thing is trying to get people to become better customers of ours. So if they are a supporter of our candidate, how do we get them to volunteer? How do we get them to vote early? How do we get them to donate to the campaign? How do we get them to recruit, reach out to their friends to bring them along? But it's also trying to make sense of all the content. I mean, marketing technology today is creating so much data that we can figure out, okay, in email marketing, if I send this flow of emails is the most optimal scheduled emails to get someone from joining our program to becoming a volunteer, but there's probably a better way. And looking at it in a more granular way and then combining that with, okay, we're running these ads online, this direct mail flight is going to their house. All of that has been siloed off for so long. And so, a couple of years ago, for the 2012 election, a big thing for us was data platforms. Like, how do we build a unified data platform across the companies that can tie together all these different marketing initiatives? And now that we progress well down the field on that, how do we now make sense of it from a data science perspective?
So what are some of the results that you guys have been able to get out of that? Like, have you converted Democrats into Republicans?
Yeah, and specifically the midterm elections. I mean, give us a sense of what it's looking like with this new data science stuff you guys are doing.
We outperformed a lot of the polling in a lot of these states because we were able to go and identify probably Democrats that would lean Republican. We were able to identify swing voters that would lean our direction. We were able to probably identify Republicans that maybe needed a little bit extra attention to bring home. And I think that's really what it is. You've got two different types of states. About 60% of the country has what's called party registration, which is, when you register to vote, you tell them you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. But then 40% of the country has no party registration. And so, data science really allows us to, we call them voter scores, where we apply, probabilities to each voter on if they're likely to support our candidate or not, so that we can focus our limited resources on just the right voters.
I think social network data is increasingly being used for politics. I know I've written about that in a couple of cases. And I just wonder, are there any social listening centers where you start to pay attention to the tweets coming in about people who might be good for volunteering efforts, or potentially those swing voters as some kind of predictive data point?
Yeah, social listening is definitely becoming a bigger part of the campaign. It really started on the communication side, where people were using it to measure really the weight and tone of a conversation, kind of as an early warning system for what probably stories are going to get traction. And that's probably your first degree of acceptance on a campaign. And now we're trying to use it for everything else. I mean, you now have all these conversations taking place. How do we reach out to these people that are supportive or are asking for more information on a topic, and then how do we then further their relationship with the campaign? I think that's the next thing you'll see is the same type of treatment you get when you hit reply on your receipt on Uber, where someone from Uber writes you back within 10 minutes to clear up any issues you have, or to thank you for being a customer. I think you're going to see the same thing in politics when someone comments on a post and says, "Oh, I just saw candidate X, they crushed it on the debate." And I think that right now that conversation is really being used to measure tone and weight. But the next step is really building out robust, I hate to use the term like customer relationship management, but that version for social data, it's now to the scale where it makes sense to set something like that up.
I just actually want to get you to talk a little bit more about what we saw last week. I got a chance to talk with someone from NGP Van, a Democratic group that was able to provide different kinds of technology to candidates. And you know what? The results weren't as impressive as they were for your side. So I'm just wondering if there are technologies that you can point to, strategies you can point to that might help people understand, what it was that helped the Republicans really have the ground game that was able to get those breakthroughs you talked about, gubernatorial or Senate or House of Representatives. What technologies do you think are really the ones that brought in the bacon and are the ones to watch for going forward?
They obviously have a great product, especially NGP Van. You can't really control as a technology partner kind of where the electorate is. And so for us, it was, we were at a different challenge. Like kind of the wind was at our back. And it was really about maximizing the energy that we had, that we were gaining every day, whether that's turning people into donors or making sure that our voters got out early because they were energized. That was probably a bigger focus for us than, for them. It was really trying to claw and get people that had probably lost a lot of enthusiasm, that maybe had voted in 2012 and were highly enthusiastic, but were less enthusiastic today, to get them to the polls. And that, can flip in different years. But, as a company, I think we're really focused on what we call the 80% of the budget that's spent somewhat inefficiently. And that's the paid media parts. And we think that kind of programmatic media buying and audience-based media buying is going to completely revolutionize that. And that's where platforms like Target Engagement, which is our self-service platform, are really focused on, about providing transparency into what everything costs and really being able to identify alternatives to spend that first dollar the most efficiently.
Well, cool. I think I have a much better sense of what you guys are up to back there, and we'll be looking for the 2016 elections to have similar, if not better, results for you all. So, Michael, thanks a lot for joining us on VentureBeat's What to Think podcast, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks.
This has been another great week of What to Think. As always, you can find us online at VentureBeat.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our podcast in iTunes yet, you definitely should. So you can just search for What to Think there on iTunes, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.